Okay, get this. Belgium. They just passed this law, right? It's about sex work.
Yeah, it's pretty huge actually. Making some serious waves globally, this one.
So basically, it gives sex workers like actual employee rights, like
Yeah.
the kind of benefits you and I get at our jobs.
Yeah, things like sick leave, maternity leave, even pensions.
It's wild, right? Like we're talking about a complete shift in how sex work is perceived, at least legally speaking.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to remember just a couple of years ago, in 2022, Belgium decriminalized sex work.
Right, but that didn't mean like all the problems were solved.
No, not at all. See, decriminalization created this sort of gray zone. It was legal, yeah, but without any of those protections for workers. It's like imagine opening a store.
And telling the employees they don't get minimum wage or anything.
Exactly. It's just not sustainable, you know?
Yeah.
This new law is trying to fix that, to offer some actual security to sex workers, to finally acknowledge, the potential for abuse and exploitation that comes with unregulated work.
I mean, that makes sense, right?
Mm.
If it's legal, it should be regulated like any other industry.
That's the idea. So now, under this law, sex workers can, for example, refuse clients or refuse to do specific acts.
But wait, so they could just like say no and that's it?
Yeah. And they can even stop an act at any time, if they feel uncomfortable without fear of reprisal.
Wow. That's a game changer, isn't it? Because before, well, I can't even imagine what kind of pressure they were under.
Right, exactly. And it's not just about personal safety either.
You're talking about the benefits.
Yeah. Think about it. A sex worker being able to take time off if they're sick, or having the right to maternity leave. I mean, these are basic rights we take for granted. But for them, this could be, life-changing.
It really makes you think about how differently we treat different types of work, right?
It does. And that's what's so fascinating about this law. It's like Belgium is saying, look, this work exists. Let's bring it out of the shadows and treat it fairly.
And I guess with that comes more responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? For the employers, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. So now anyone who wants to employ sex workers, they have to meet certain criteria. For instance, they have to have a registered business here in Belgium.
Okay, so it's not like just anyone can open up shop.
Nope. And they also have to be deemed, of good character. Plus, there are all these safety measures they have to put in place, like panic buttons and providing condoms, obviously.
So it's not just about protecting the workers, it's also about holding the businesses accountable.
Exactly. It's trying to create a safer, more regulated industry overall.
But there are some limitations to the law, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't cover everything. Like, home-based sex work is excluded, as is striptease and pornography.
Yeah, those feel like pretty significant gaps. I wonder why that is.
Well, there are a few arguments. Some say it's about preventing, say, brothels from popping up in residential areas, which I guess you can understand. But then others argue that it's actually pushing those workers into more dangerous, more unregulated situations.
Right, because if they're not covered by the law, then who's looking out for them?
Exactly. It's a complex issue, for sure. And of course, not everyone is happy about this new law. Even within the sex work community, there are mixed feelings.
Yeah, I can imagine. What are some of the concerns you've heard?
Well, the Belgian Union of Sex Workers, they see it as, a huge step forward. But even they are worried, like, what if municipalities use the law to actually restrict sex work even more under the guise of, like, safety regulations?
Yeah, I guess there's always that risk when you start adding more rules and regulations.
For sure. And then you've got groups like feminist organizations who just fundamentally disagree with the whole premise.
Because they see sex work as inherently exploitative.
Right. They're worried that this law is normalizing, even legitimizing something they believe should be abolished.
And I imagine they're also concerned about the potential for increased trafficking, right?
Definitely. That's a big fear for them. So you see, even with this new law, the debate is far from over. There are valid points on both sides. It's a really complex, nuanced issue.
So where does that leave us? Belgium's taken this bold step, but it seems like there's a lot more to think about.
Absolutely. And that's what's so important about these deep dives, right? We get to explore these complex issues, hear different perspectives, but ultimately it's up to each of us to research, to think critically, and to form our own informed opinions.
So for our listeners out there, we leave you with this. If you were in charge, how would you approach this issue? How would you balance the rights of sex workers with concerns about exploitation and safety?
It's a tough question. There are no easy answers, but it's a conversation we need to keep having.
I couldn't agree more.